Welcome to BCA. President-elect Donald Trump is creating a new department called the D.O.G.E, or Department of Government Efficiency, headed by none other than Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy. Now, Vivek Ramaswamy went on Fox News today to give us some idea on what the American people can expect from this. Now, I have the full interview. I want to share it with you now. It's about 10 minutes long, so let's watch.
They're going to be saving a lot of money and making our country stronger and better, and they'll be coming out with individual reports, but a big one toward the end. And you put those two together, it's going to be really great.
Jimmy. And that is President-elect Trump and on Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy leading the newly created Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, to identify and cut wasteful spending of taxpayer money within the federal government. As America stares over a fiscal cliff due to the $7 trillion in new spending by the Biden-Harris administration, which sent inflation up better than 20%. The national debt now standing at $36 trillion, with interest on the debt alone approaching $1 trillion. Joining me now in this Sunday Morning Futures exclusive is the co-leader of that department, the Department of Government Efficiency, Vivek Ramaswamy, with me this morning. Great to see you.
It's good to see you, Maria.
Thank you so much for joining us. Happy to have you here on set. I want to get your take on how this begins.
Sure.
What are you looking to cut right from the beginning?
So first is we want to go right in through executive action to do the failures of the executive branch that need to be addressed. Because the dirty little secret right now, Maria, is the people we elect to run the government, they're not the ones who actually run the government. It's the unelected bureaucrats in the administrative state. That was created through executive action. It's going to be fixed through executive action. Think about the Supreme Court's environment over the last several years. They've held that many of those regulations are unconstitutional at a large scale. Rescind those regulations, pull those regs back, and then that gives us the industrial logic to then downsize the size of that administrative state. And the beauty of all of this is that can be achieved just through executive action without Congress. Score some early wins, and then you look at those bigger portions of the federal budget that need to be addressed one by one. So I think that's one way to think about this is how can the President of the United States, who's been elected with a historic mandate, actually do the thing that the voters have voted for. They haven't voted for incremental change here this time, Maria. We have voted for sweeping change, and the voters actually deserve to get it. And we're focused on how to do that as early and as quickly as possible.
So President-elect Trump just said on that soundbite that you're going to make recommendations. So you're going to make recommendations in terms of where to cut after all that you've just said. Then what?
Look, we're not going to be cutting ribbons. We're going to be cutting costs. And so those recommendations are going to be on a real-time basis. But I do want to take a big step back and understand, for people to understand the scope of this problem. Over $500 billion that's spent every year right now was not even authorized by Congress in the first place. The Pentagon has just failed its 7th consecutive audit, nearly $1 trillion of budget. They can't even tell you where it goes. So I think part of this is exposing for the public the extent of that rot and waste, but then to take steps first through executive action and then laying the groundwork for broader change through legislation as well to rein in that deficit, to rein in that budget. And more crucially, Maria, I know we're talking about this in terms of efficiency, but there's something deeper going on here. This is about restoring self-governance and accountability in America as well. Elected leaders, if they make the wrong decisions, voters have a great choice. You can vote them out and remove them. Most of the people making these decisions, from healthcare to the Department of Defense, are failing on effectiveness because they have no accountability. Historically, it's been the view of many scholars to say that those people could not even be fired. Now we take a different view with the environment the Supreme Court has given us in recent years, and we're going to use that in a pretty extensive way, Maria, to move quickly.
You're going to have pushback, not just from the left. You may have pushback from those very people who are running those departments, running those agencies. They want as many people as they want in there. You're going to want to fire people.
Yeah.
So how are you going to deal with that? You're also perhaps looking at pushback from Congress. How are you going to deal with Congress? How are you going to deal with having Congress need to change the law?
Well, look, the beauty of this is I think we have a lot of allies in Congress who have their heart in the right place. But what we've learned is over the last 40 years, even conservatives, we've talked a big game for 40 years about cutting the federal government, about reducing the scope of the federal government. Politicians haven't been able to do it. And so Elon and I, we're not politicians. We're businessmen. We're coming at it from the outside. Sometimes if you go inside, you become native to the system. So President Trump, I applaud him for his creativity and his open-mindedness to setting this up for success in a way that hasn't happened before. But I come back to the principle. In the early months, score quick wins through executive action, show what can be done then, and then I think we will lay the groundwork for Congress to have to take meaningful steps in budget reductions for the future. A lot of these discussions we have are theoretical. Right? I have to cut different entitlement programs or whatever. Let's start with the fact that there is massive waste, fraud, and abuse right now. Federal contractors are really exploiting the federal government. You could take haircuts across the board, and they would be no worse off for it. And it's not just about cutting cost, but increasing effectiveness from defense to healthcare. A lot of that is a failure of the administrative state itself, Maria, that rests under the executive branch. And I'm optimistic. It's part of why we've set an end date on this. Our work is done by July 4th, 2026. Unlike every other government project, we don't want this one to last. We want to go in, fix the problem, dissolve, and move on, and set an example for how our federal government should run.
I love that. But again, you are going to face pushback from within.
Sure.
And you are going to have to make this so compelling that you get the support, congressional support. So how do you do that?
Well, look, I think the public is on our side. Most of the public understands their taxpayer dollars are not being well spent. They want to hold these decision makers accountable, and they're not able to. These congressmen are responsive to the people. Many of them are quietly on our side as well. So I think the division of responsibilities, a lot of people who face two-year election cycles in political Congress, they end up looking at what's happening tomorrow. We're looking at the next 250 years. We want to give them credit for doing the right thing. Elon and I aren't in this for the credit, but I think we're going to build the consensus to make the kind of deep cuts that haven't been made for most of our history.
Are you expecting to close down entire agencies, like President Trump has talked about the Department of Education, for example? Are you going to be closing down departments?
We expect mass reductions. We expect certain agencies to be deleted outright. We expect mass reductions in force in areas of the federal government that are bloated. We expect massive cuts among federal contractors and others who are overbilling the federal government. So yes, we expect all of the above. And I think people will be surprised by, how quickly we're able to move with some of those changes, given the legal backdrop the Supreme Court has given us.
You've got what has been called a deep state. You've got people who have been career bureaucrats in place right now. Didn't President Biden put in plans to ensure that you're not going to be able to fire those people at all? How do you get around that? And, I asked Joni Ernst, are you for term limits? She says, yes, I am for term limits, as long as the people around me are also for term limits. Mm-hmm. That's not in place right now. So how do you get rid of those people who are dug in?
Well, a lot of what's happened is President Biden has made a lot of changes trying to entrench the administrative state. The Supreme Court has slapped them on the wrists numerous times. So we're working with a legal landscape here that is historic. You think about a president of the United States like Donald Trump, elected with the mandate he's been given, both chambers of Congress belonging to Republicans, a 6-3 conservative majority in the Supreme Court. Maria, if we don't downsize the federal government now, it's never going to happen in the future as well. So this is a historic opportunity. We're not actually going to squander this, but I think part of the key is to move quickly, to move effectively. I think that mass deregulation that I talked about earlier, that gives us the industrial logic to then make cuts to that bureaucracy, and moving quickly is our objective.
Have you thought about moving some of these departments or agencies out of Washington?
It's funny you bring up this point. Yes is the answer, but here's why. They'll say, well, what happens to the people who live in Washington, D.C.? Here's the dirty little secret in the federal bureaucracy today. Most people don't even show up to work. So if you require most of those federal bureaucrats to just say, like normal working Americans, you come to work 5 days a week, a lot of them won't want to do that. And by the way, that creates a logic for many of those agencies being outside of D.C. in the first place. So these are, again, examples. It's a great point you just brought up.
So would you
sweeping
move, for
changes
example,
we're able to make quickly.
You could move the Energy Department to Texas or to Pennsylvania. You could move agriculture somewhere else. Is that what you're thinking?
Well, look, I think that, yes, absolutely. But I think even bigger picture than that, many of these agencies should be downsized wherever they are. And for whatever does remain, move many of them out to be where they're more accountable to the people. And by the way, if you have many voluntary reductions in force of the workforce in the federal government along the way, great. That's a good side effect of those policies as well. And so our goal is not to be cruel, by the way, to the individual federal employees. Most of them, I do want to say this, are individually good people, and we want to be compassionate and generous in how we handle this transition. But the real issue is there's just too many of them. We don't need 4 million, and we shouldn't have 4 million civil servants who can't be can't or aren't even elected or can't be removed from their positions, it's anti-democratic.
Real quick, we got to jump, but when you look from 30,000 feet, I know you're just getting into this now. Which agency or department is the most bloated, would you say?
It's a tough competition. It's across the administrative state. I mean, President Trump's talked extensively about areas like the Department of Education. Obviously, those kinds of agencies shouldn't even exist and should be returned to the states. But it's a culture, Maria, that's pervaded the entire federal government of hiring people who have no accountability to everyday Americans. And I think that's what's going to change when you take this new effort at DOGE, at the Department of Government Efficiency. It's about efficiency as much as it is about restoring accountability. And this time, actions are going to speak louder than words. And I'm excited to get started in January.
I love all of this, Vivek. I really do. But wow, what a year and a half you've had. As we go, a little self-reflection from you. What a year and a half you've had.
I mean, what a journey it's been. I'm incredibly grateful to this country. I mean, I was 37 years old when I became the youngest person ever to run for U.S. president. I've lived the American dream. It's only possible in this country.
That's right.
And our goal, and Elon Musk, take him as somebody who's an immigrant to this country, came from nothing, became the most successful capitalist in history. We want to work together to pass that American dream on to our kids. That's what motivates us, and I think we're going to do it.
This great nation is lucky to have you. Thank you very much, Vivek.
Thank you.
So this is definitely something I'm going to be paying attention to. It's going to be interesting seeing how this plays out. So leave me a comment, good or bad, on how you think this is going to affect us, the American people. And with that, I am going to say good night. You guys have a good night. I'll see you on the next one.